just a little bit of background, just to make things a bit fun. I was going to give you a little history of antibiotics, just to see where we've gotten to and the urgency that we should all have. So, as you know, the WHO has called upon all healthcare leaders and workers to improve antimicrobial prescribing to combat the rising resistance. Antibiotics, which were truly a miracle drug, have now become a victim of their own success. When penicillin was developed in the petri dishes of Alexander Fleming, that's when the age of the miracle drug began. Its success was then seen following its discovery through helping the soldiers during the Second World War for combating injury, infections that would previously have caused death. It then later on found itself in the farms of Boston, where farmers used the antibiotics to help their animals grow faster and stay healthier. Finally, it was time for the drug to become irresistible in the prescribing world, and our prescribers looked to this drug because if there was a chance that it would work, they would prescribe it. And all this has now led to what we are facing, which is a potential post-antibiotic era. So with all that said, NYERI, CRH, we were committed to play our part in fighting against antimicrobial resistance. We therefore needed to know what the current state of antibiotic prescribing was, and we chose to start with the most labor-intensive department, outpatient. The objective of this audit was to evaluate the current antimicrobial prescribing trends and the scale of antimicrobial prescribing. We wanted to determine whether our prescribers were compliant with national guidelines, because that's what currently exists, and evaluate the gaps in prescribing knowledge by reviewing the appropriateness of the treatment selected. So the methodology was that we run an audit for 7 days, from Monday to Sunday, over a 24-hour period in May this year. We collected all prescriptions received in pharmacy from the outpatient department during the week and tabulated the information on the Excel, including the following parameters, which was age, so we just divided whether you were pediatric or adult. The name, formulation and strength of the antimicrobial, the dose and duration that was prescribed, the number of non-antimicrobials prescribed, so co-prescribing, and indication, which we had to obtain later on by looking at patient files. So the results, I'll just read them out. So as I said in the AMS presentation, the results showed that 62% of the 1,545 prescriptions that we collected had at least one antimicrobial agent. 73% of these prescriptions were for adults, of which 55% had at least one antimicrobial, and 27 were for pediatric patients, of which 84.5% had greater than one antimicrobial agent. So we noted that there were a total of 4,100 prescribed medication over that 1 week. That included non-antimicrobials and antimicrobials. For adult prescriptions, of the medication prescribed to adults, 21% were antimicrobial agents. Of these, only 34% were first-line treatments, and 25% had no documented indication. So we had no indication of what was being treated. While for pediatric patients, of all the medicines prescribed to pediatrics, 43.9% were antimicrobial agents, and of those, only 31.5% were recommended first-line treatment. Again, just to reiterate, this is outpatient department. 38.1% had no documented indication. The results also showed that 25.3% adult and 23.1% pediatric prescriptions of antimicrobials were deemed inappropriate. The reasons that we included as stating, this is a review by pharmacists, so we didn't have clinical pharmacists, so we didn't have representation from the medical team in this baseline audit to peer review what we deemed as appropriate and inappropriate. But the things that the 3 categories of inappropriate prescribing, we recorded as no evidence of an infection, so clinically or even documented. Inadequate coverage, so selecting the wrong antibiotic for the indication, and use of 3rd or 4th line reserved agents without a clear indication as to why. Majority of those, there was no evidence of prior treatment. We also noted a number of indications where antibiotics are not recommended, such as 45 prescriptions within that week were for upper respiratory tract infections. Lastly, in our results, amoxicillin was the most prescribed antibiotic, but only at 14%. This is because there was a total of 22 oral antibiotic agents used over that week. Of that 22 oral antibiotics, only 45.5 were in the access list of antibiotics. 54.5% was in the watch list. Just for interest, the most commonly treated infection in adults was dental and ENT, and in pediatrics was respiratory. So this audit has provided us with some essential information to create our local AMR and AMS action plan. We are committed to set annual targets and re-audit to assess the improvement in antimicrobial prescribing, because the reality is that the infections caused by resistant antimicrobials fail to respond to treatment, resulting in prolonged illness and greater risk of death. This is just a slide to show where we are in terms of the resistant pattern, thanks to CDC. This just demonstrates the urgency of what we're doing. The table shows how quickly resistance has developed from the time the antibiotic was introduced into the market. In some instances, such as levofloxacin, resistance was seen in the same year as the time it was introduced into the market. So what are our limitations that we envision? One is a lack of effective and appropriate IT infrastructure, which includes not being able to record clinical history of the patient and reviewing that. Lack of local data in terms of resistant patterns. Lack of updated and comprehensive local and national guidelines, as Dr. Sarah mentioned earlier. Laboratory services, so just having the right equipment, the right personnel, and just support. Expertise, so again, we are looking at just having a strong microbiology presence. Pharmacy clinical presence on the ward level, so we'd like to get our pharmacists out on the ward level to influence prescribing. And drug stockouts, so we can't prescribe over the guidelines that we produce if the drugs are not available. So in conclusion, you can see why the other one was supposed to come after. There's a need of antimicrobial stewardship program. We would like to see a reduction in prescribing by 15% by next year, May. We want to increase the use of access antibiotics to 60%, and this would hopefully also reduce the cost of antimicrobials. We want to focus on evidence-based, safe, and cost-effective prescribing. So the next stage is to look departmentally to develop local guidelines, looking at pediatrics and adults, general medicine, diabetes, then moving on to ICU. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. for that very enlightening presentation. A better hand clap for Dr. Nkatha. I'm glad Professor Revati is in this room, and